select is simply telling SQL what data to choose, what data to select, and show us. So another thing, you can also use select distinct to pull only unique values from your database. So for example, if someone signed up twice in this example, let's say someone created 2 accounts with the same email address, or someone created 2 accounts with different email addresses with the same name, because we're selecting for name in the users table, they would actually show up twice. And so just, a little helpful hint, if you do select distinct, then that will allow you to only pull distinct values in your query. So if, it's not used super often, but if you're trying to pull unique things like an email or whatever, it could be useful in case some people have signed up for duplicate accounts or, that all of those kinds of issues. So the next thing, is the from command. So the select command is telling SQL what you want to select. The from command is telling SQL where to pull that data from. So what's the name, in your case, what's the name of the table that you're using to capture data? Put that name of the table after the from statement. So in our case, in our example database, we are using the users table. And so we want to say, select the name column in the users table from users. And so what this is telling SQL is, here's the data we want. And now where SQL is, okay, I know what data you want. Now where do I get it? That's where the from statement comes in. So it says from users, from table users, and then it goes on to the rest of the query. And so the select and the from statements will always follow each other. Sometimes you'll also see, if you want to do a select all, you'll see what's known as an asterisk or a wildcard, where it'll be a select, I'll type it. You'll see something like select star, which means select all from users. And so what a query like this would do is it would select every column, every bit of data in this table, and return it, because you're saying select everything from the users table. Just a quick example, you'll see that a decent bit. So that is the from statement. The next thing is the join statement. And so this one is probably the most confusing in the entire SQL query. So this command will temporarily join 2 tables that we want to search so that we can pull data from multiple queries. So join tells SQL the table that we want to join. So in this case, it's saying join errors, which is a completely different table. So you're seeing we're selecting from users. And so there's no mention of the errors table just yet. And so what join is saying is, okay, you're pulling data from users. Join the errors table on this modifier. And so this modifier tells SQL which columns in the tables, the table we're selecting from and the table we're joining with, should map to each other. So for example, you can see in the errors table, we have the user ID in the errors table. So user ID column in the errors table. And so what we're saying here is from table errors, we are going to join and we are going to map. So think of it as a match. So every time, because it says on this column, user ID column on the errors table is going to map to the ID column on the users table. And so like every time you see a 1 over here, it is going to map to user with the ID of 1. Now think of this in your case. So let's say you're running a company with multiple products or multiple users that are all tied to one account. And so you want to see, how is this one account? How do their users interact? And you want it all to be associated with a single account. So what you can do there is you can use the join on statement to tie different account user emails back to one master account. So like you see now, there is only one entry. So there's only one user with an ID of 1. But you'll see multiple occurrences, multiple errors for that same user. And so each one of these errors will be mapped back to that single user ID. Just like every purchase you make on Amazon is mapped back to your customer or your user account, this is kind of a similar situation. And so this is saying for every error that occurs over here, map it back to the user ID. That's what the join statement is doing. And so when you hit the join, you're essentially giving SQL a larger data set to search. And so you're saying this ID of 1, now suddenly, instead of just searching this users table, because you've joined the two, it will be searching all of the information over here as well. And so that's why the join statement is critical. If we just wanted to say, show me every user created between these parameters and not worry about counting the error occurrences, not worrying about production errors, we wouldn't need to do a join on statement. It would be totally redundant. The only reason that we need to do it is because we need to access this data right here. We need to see the mode in which the error was generated and map it or tie it to the user ID that generated those errors. All right, so the next statement. So we've selected the data we want. We've told SQL where this data is staying, where it's active, where it's living. We've said we also want to include other data, so in this case from the errors table. And then the where statement tells SQL how to access the right data. In this case, we're telling it to show us users who have gotten errors in production, so where the mode column, so where the mode of errors is equal to production, which you can see here. Quick note, the parentheses are actually important. It means that SQL will treat this like what's known as a string, and essentially it'll use, instead of trying to read production, it will use whatever is between those two quotes and match it to whatever is in here. So what it's saying is where the mode column in the errors table equals production, and so the where and the and statements are all connected. So show me all of the users that fill these three conditions. So I'm telling SQL, here is the data set I want to use. Now show me every user where the mode equals production and that was created after, so that's the greater than sign, sorry. That's the greater than sign after March 1st, 2014, and that was created at before April 1st, 2014. And so here's the created at column. So this is saying, we've joined the columns where the mode in the errors table equals production. So where this equals production and where the created at in the users column, users table, not column, is between March 1st and April 1st. And then for the last thing, so this is where you're getting into the selection. So everything highlighted green is done through the first 6 lines of this SQL query. And then lastly, we are going to group by the name of the users. And so this just means that, let's say that this group of users came, they were actually going to be returned. So let's say we did a select all, and they would come out just kind of a jumbled mess. If you're going through hundreds of thousands of lines of data, that's where group by comes in really handy, because you can say group by the name of the name column in the users table, so that you can quickly glance over and say, okay, all these users are the same, they have these attributes, whatever you need to do. And that just makes it really easy to sort through and not have to manually go through every single column and see what users are actually the same. And so you can group by anything. We could group by the user ID. We could group by the created at date. We could group by the name of their company. But in this case, I just wanted to do name because what this does is it shows you, oh, Abel Black has 2 errors and those are tied to his name. We're grouping by him. So if we didn't have the group by, then we would have an Abel Black 1. Oops. That would be a 1 as well. So again, this statement tells SQL how to group your data when it returns the query result. In this case, it'll be grouped by the name in the users table. Just think of it as a massive sort function in Excel. That's probably the best way to approach it. Similar to group by, there's also an order by statement. So this is a different SQL query. And so essentially this statement tells SQL how to order your data. So this can be really useful when pulling massive amounts of information from a database. So for example, again, this is also similar to a sort function in Excel. So this is saying pull, here is what the data I want. Here is where that data is living. Here are the other columns that I want access to for this SQL query. Here is the data, the way I want to filter that data. So the errors are created at between now and 1 week. So any area around now and 1 week. So SQL can actually do some interesting, intelligent queries. So this is just saying, from this time that I'm running this query, give me the data, give me every error that's been created between now and 1 week. And then group by the name of the users and the ID of the users and order by ID. And so in this query, for example, you would be ordering by the user ID. And so it would be 1, 2, if this was returning it, 1 would be up here, 2 would be here, 3 would be here, and so forth. All right, so the limit. So this tells SQL how much data to return. So this is where a feature of SQL that exists just because companies have these massive databases. So almost every company has millions, hundreds of thousands, at least, often millions, tens of millions of lines of data. And so the limit function can be really useful because if you're doing a query that's running through, tens, hundreds, thousands of tables and millions of rows within each of these tables, that just takes a really long time to run. And so if you wanted to do something like, show me everyone that's spent more than $100 on this product, show me the last 100 people that have spent more than $100 on this product, that's when something like limit can come in handy. So limit will tell SQL how much data to return. So in our case, for this statement, we'll only receive the first 15 results that fit the results of this query. And why is that? Because of this right here. Because we're saying, here's the data we want to select. We want to pull it from here. We want to include this data from the other tables. We want to filter it using the mode equals production, and the errors have to be created within a week of today. And we want to group by these attributes and order by these, and only show me the first 15 results. So again, this is really useful if you're using large data sets, and it'll show you, it essentially saves you from running super long queries that could take on the order of even hours to execute in some cases. So next we're going to get into functions. So the one thing that we saw earlier is the count function. And so you can see that right here. And what that's doing is you're pulling the ID column from the errors table, and then you're going to count the occurrences of this using this function. And so other functions, SQL can return automatically just by having you type this, the average value of a query. It can count the number of rows inherent in a query. It can return the first value of a column or a row, or it can return the last value of a column or a row. So for example, you could say first, and then within those parentheses, you could type the name of a column. Let's say users.id, and that would show you the last value in that column. And so this is useful if you wanted to say, show me the last person that created an account, or show me the last person that fit this set of queries and is in this column. And so all of these things you can use in creative ways to get the data that you want. Max returns the largest value. I mean, think of it. You can imagine, show me the customer that's made us the biggest payment within a certain period of time or ever even. What is the maximum amount someone has spent on our product? What is the maximum amount someone has logged in and used our product? And all of these things can get you can get an understanding of your power users, what people are doing a lot, what actions are occurring a lot. And you can do interesting things like compare the largest value against the average to get a rough sense of, do I have a lot of power users that are spending a lot of money? Do I have high averages that are pretty close to the maximum value? What are my customers actually doing? Min, so this again returns the smallest value, just a flip of the max. And then sum will return the sum. So show me a sum of all orders placed within the last 2 weeks. It's a very simple query you can run using this function. So that's it. I mean, not the course. Obviously, we're going to dig in and do quite a few more examples, walk through other things you need to know, other things that'll be helpful, do some advanced stuff, show you queries. We're going to write some of our own. It'll be a lot of fun, but this is the basics. So you now have an idea of what SQL is. You can look at a SQL statement and pretty much should be able to understand at a rough approximation of what's going on. So you now know the basic SQL syntax. I would take a minute and try and review the syntax and figure out what data you want to pull from your SQL database. And again, do this all through the lens of what we mentioned you want to learn earlier. I mean, do you want to learn or see who your power users are? Then maybe now is a good time to try and pull together a quick SQL query using count or the max functions. Maybe you just want to pull a query and say, show me everyone that's ever bought a product. Again, you can now do that. So I would encourage you to go quickly through, check out the slides before jumping into the next section. Just make a quick note of the different syntax and different functions and different things you can use to create SQL queries, and just use that as kind of tools in your toolbox, which now going forward, we're going to use those tools to answer specific questions you have about marketing, about your customers, and so forth. So get excited. We're going to jump into case studies and have you writing your own queries in just a second.